Papadimitriou. It's one of these guys you don't want to have to introduce because you'll just never feel adequate again. But he has made seminal contributions in almost every area of computer science. I'm really interested to see what we're going to hear about today. I think maybe he's best known and to a wider audience for his Logic Comics graphic novel, which I didn't realize he had written. That's really cool. I brought my copy. Anyway, looking forward to it.
Thanks a lot, Chris. So this is a joint work with Santosh and Wolfgang. Just to set the scenery, you know, everybody has thought about it. I mean, there are huge disconnects. Babies do amazing things, computers do amazing things, and there seems to be a little intersection. Okay, right. So there is also we spend a lot of energy and cleverness to come up with algorithms, and when we can't, then we prove the problem simply complete, and then the brain goes on to do its own thing. Okay, and then of course you have the current variant of this conundrum, and a rather curious and unexpected disconnect is that despite explosive deluge of all kinds of insights into how the brain works, we don't seem to get any closer to understanding how the brain works. Okay, you know, how the mind comes out of it. But by mind, of course, I mean cognition, behavior, language, these things. Okay, so this is, I think, an amazing question. Okay, so you know, in fact, it's I think of it as a sunset from the Berkeley Hills question. Okay, in the following way, in the following sense, right? That every time I see this, the first kind of thought that comes to my mind is, why doesn't everybody stop what they're doing and come to see this thing? Okay, right. I mean, so when I think about this question, I have the same attitude. Okay, right. So it's extremely compelling, and
except it's much harder to address that and just drive up the hill.
yeah, right. Yes. Right. Yeah. And you know, I'm not. And also another difference. I'm not sure that I'd be happy if everybody drives up the hill, but I will be happy if all of you guys work on this. Okay, you know, and I mean, you know, then the question comes: what are you going to bring to this question? And the answer is obviously computation, right? I mean, you know, and the question now reduces to how does one think computation about the brain? And that's a good question, right? I mean, so Alan Turing famously used the brain both as inspiration and as research goal. And then John von Neumann, I don't know how many of you know this, but he wrote a book that is worth reading. Soon before his death, actually it came out posthumously. One sort of brilliant quotation from this book, which sort of, you know, becomes very you know, it becomes true every time you get involved with the brain. Is that the way the brain works may be characterized by less logical and arithmetical depth. By the way, he used depth than we are normally used to. Okay, so instead, another thing that he used in this book is the first time that I believe that the word singularity was used in connection to computers and the brain. Okay, so all right, Les Valiant in 23 years ago, he did something extremely valiant. Okay, he tried very seriously to make computational sense out of the brain. Okay, so I'm going to come back to his work, which is what inspired me to initially to do this. But let me just say two things. He says that the computational theory of the brain is both possible and essential. And two, he came up with a beautiful model, automata theoretic model, essentially a random graph with a language for operations, very carefully designed so that it can possibly be implemented by neurons. And then this also generates a genre of algorithms, which he called vicinal algorithms. And he came up with a few very interesting ideas, including the idea of items, which is how concepts are represented, and to which I'm going to come back later. David Marr, an amazing, a Turing-like figure in computational neuroscience. He, in his brief life, he came up with brilliant, again, sort of very early and therefore not totally accepted today, but recognized as pioneering theories for the cerebellum, the cortex, and the hippocampus, which he called paleocortex. And most famously, he came up with something that he called the three-step program, and I'm going to translate. That in order to study computationally a brain system, you have to do three things. Okay, first of all, what the system does. Okay, what the experimentalists say that the system does. And number two, what is the algorithm that does it, and what is the hardware used. Okay, so this has been quite influential, sort of, shaping the field. And now the question is the following: can you use Marr's framework? And this is me thinking like 3 years ago. Okay, right? To identify the algorithm run by the brain. Okay, that's a lofty goal. Okay, and what would that algorithm be? Okay, right? We have beautiful candidates. Okay, so it seems like we only have to choose one and run with it. Okay.
Is there a reason you deliberately left out the one that everybody's been talking about in this workshop?
Which one?
That property.
Well, stochastic gradient is. Okay, you're right. I should have said back prop. Yeah, it catches your mind, your eye. Yeah. Okay, right. So, and you know what the answer is? Nah, right? That's not going to happen. Okay. So let me tell you what my, I won't say approach. It's like a disposition. Okay. I think we should start by admitting defeat. Okay. That there are hundreds of systems in the brain, and their interactions come in the thousands. So there are going to be thousands of problems to be solved, and we should get ready for the long haul of discovering one by one, using Marr's method, but not in a grand way. And I believe that I'm pretty sure that this is how Marr meant his method. And in other words, what we should come up with is like small computational theories for specific systems that are consistent with what we know from neuroscience. And what we are proposing to do is start at a very, very interesting place, which I call symbolic, and I hope it will be very abundantly clear what I mean by that a little later in the talk. And one candidate is assemblies of excitatory neurons in medial temporal lobe. And this is what I'm going to jump in right next. Okay, so here is a recent experiment. They recorded from humans let's say, they had many subjects and a dozen subjects and hundreds of neurons. But let's concentrate on one subject and one neuron. And basically, they showed a couple of hundred pictures. It's a quite complicated protocol, but let's simplify it this way. And so they show the Eiffel Tower. This particular neuron lights up every time the Eiffel Tower is shown. Okay, then you show something else, it doesn't light up. You show the Eiffel Tower, it lights up. You saw Obama, he was president. Okay, right, yeah. So the neuron does light up. Okay. Then you do this. You Photoshop Obama instead of in front of the Eiffel Tower. Okay, you probably do it a little better than I did here. Okay, so and dutifully the neuron fires because it fires every time it sees the Eiffel Tower. Okay. Then you show the Eiffel Tower. Of course, it fires. You show other stuff. It doesn't fire. Guess what?
Fires.
It fires. Yeah. Okay? I get teary-eyed when I say this, okay? This guy has learned in front of your eyes that Obama has been to the Eiffel Tower. Okay, that's learning, okay? We all work on learning, so, now you see it, okay? So, so that's, these are the specs. All right, can you do this? How is this done? What's the hardware? What's the algorithm? All right, that's yeah.
Is it only Obama or anybody else going to the Eiffel Tower?
Sorry?
Is it only Obama?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Okay, this particular neuron would probably not fire if anybody else had gone to the Eiffel Tower. I think. Okay.
How many times do you have to show this?
A couple, a few. Actually, that's another great question. When you show Obama in the Eiffel Tower, and actually, these are actually examples. Okay, I'm not sure. I'm not saying that that Obama and the Eiffel Tower got together. Okay, but when you see a combined image, you say, and now this is a combined image. Pay special attention. Okay, so you see two things and they're together. Okay, so in other words, you prompt a little. Okay. All right.
So that was literally a single neuron in the brain?
Yeah, a single neuron in the brain. So it's not fMRI, okay? It's single neuron in the brain. All right. So they recorded a tiny fraction of MTL neurons. They showed about very few pictures in comparison. And about 10 neurons responded consistently to one of these, okay? And this means to me, okay, so it should mean to everybody, that its memory must be like the Eiffel Tower and the Forbidden City and Obama, is represented by an assembly of many, perhaps 10,000 neurons. And this is not a new idea. It was first presented by Hebb, and recently it's the closest thing that we have as for a consensus in neuroscience. Okay, so that people believe, interpret all evidence that we have that yes, at some point that's how memories are represented. Now, this set of neurons has to be highly connected and therefore stable. Somehow it's formed by sensory stimuli. In other words, once the sensory cortex has done its work in processing what we see, there is some attention mechanism that projects the result into the MTL, and these things are formed. By the way, all this is speculation, interpretation, right? But it's not without reason. Every time of things memory, roughly all these neurons fire, and when we see two of these items together, these two memories can seep into each other, can sort of slowly creep and move, sort of, and intersect. Okay? Yeah.
Did they test that when the subject thinks of Eiffel Tower or Obama, that fires? What you say there, that every time you think of his memory?
Yes. I mean, I thought that what I showed you was enough. What do you have in mind? What?
Ask them to imagine the Eiffel Tower.
I see. I don't know if this, there are several sort of, much older experiments where this is done. Yes, right. Yeah. The famous Jennifer Aniston, the Jennifer Aniston neuron, sort of, Yes, yes, right. Yeah. So it's actually, this is by the same group, sort of, 15 years later. Okay. So now sort of, we have some idea about the hardware, the algorithm. How are assemblies formed? How are they recalled? How does association happen, right? And there is a theory challenge, okay? In a sparse random graph, how do you find a highly connected induced subgraph, okay? Sort of, in theory, we have been haunted by this problem for 50 years, okay? It's called the clique problem, right? I mean, it's funny that you find it in front of you, sort of, as soon as you start thinking about the brain, okay? All right, so yeah.
But there's evidence that the synapses are changing all the time, so it's not like it's something.
Synapses are changing, meaning that.
Including new ones.
Yes, of course, yes, right, yeah.
It's not an unchanging pattern.
Right. Okay. All right. I mean, the good news is that we can do it without thinking about this. Okay, right. I mean, yeah.
But the dense connectivity inside the assemblies is kind of a hypothesis, right?
Everything is a hypothesis. Yes.
It's not we don't know that it's necessary for.
We know it's necessary for the current theory of assemblies. In other words, when people in neuroscience talk about assemblies, they mean highly connected, starting with head. Okay, very highly connected sets of neurons. What Vitaly is referring to is that in Valiant's items, as I'm going to say later, internal connectivity is immaterial. Okay, so because they work in a completely different way. All right. So how basically, as I said, when the sensory cortex is done, then some attention mechanism causes this thing, probably in the inferotemporal cortex, to fire repeatedly, and as a result, this disassembly is formed. Okay, and the question is exactly how does this happen? And by the way, when I say 10 to the 4 is the result of a zero-sum war going on between excitation and inhibition, right? I mean, because the more excitation happens, then the more inhibition happens, and 10 to the 4 seems to be is equilibrium. Okay, this is the size of this assembly. And of course, you should remember that these are scattered neurons, right? I mean, they're not like anywhere, and that's extremely important, okay? It's important also philosophically, right? I mean, because this is the first time in the life of this memory where it lost its every connection to the world, okay? It has become an abstract memory, okay, right? I mean, in other words, in cortex, okay, so, let me show you this. So let's, I guess, the biological term for metaphor is homology, but let's call it a metaphor, all right? I mean, so this is Richard Axel, and 6 years ago he wrote a paper, a beautiful a prophetic paper about olfaction in the mouse, and basically, how olfaction is projected. And basically what happened is, it's in three, okay. In the mouse's nose and your nose, there are these cells that specialize in odorants, okay, right? I mean, there is a tarragon cell. You know, there are a few million tarragon cells in your nose, and once the tarragon smell hits, then these neurons fire, and then a lot of activity happens. Something called the olfactory bulb, which is here, okay, and in there is a tiny little sphere. It's a pea-shaped, pea-sized piece of the brain, and without it there is something called a glomerulus that specializes on tarragon. Okay, and once this fires, there is a huge pathway, sort of very strong pathway that projects to this called the piriform cortex, and there it disperses. Okay, so it becomes a random set. Okay, and probably this is the moment that you say, I like tarragon. Okay, it becomes an idea. Here is the discussion section of this paper, and I'm reading it to you because Axel got the Nobel Prize in 2004 for the discussion section of another paper. Okay, so okay, so something's happening here. I don't know what it is. Okay. I'll read it to you because I remember it from. So basically, a few cells, initially, a few cells could receive enough input. In other words, a few neurons could receive enough input to fire, and this small fraction would then generate sufficient recurrent excitation to recruit a larger population of neurons. And then the strong feedback inhibition resulting from this, what I told you, the war between inhibition and excitation, would suppress further spiking. In the extreme, some cells could receive enough recurrent input to fire without receiving initial input. In other words, what happens is that there are the born rich that get a lot of input, and then they recruit other things, other neurons, and that's how the assembly is formed. So looking back here, okay, so what you should think is that this is a random graph. P seems to be about 1%, and let's say GMP, sort of the standard Erdős-Renyi random graph, and our job now is to understand how this structure is going to create this. All right. So one obvious thing we should take into account is plasticity. Okay, why is that? Because this is about learning, right? And plasticity is the way is synonymous to learning, right? I mean, it's how neurons learn from our brain learns from experience. Okay, and basically, near synchronous fire of two cells connected by synapse increases synaptic weight by a small factor up to a limit. So this seems to be sort of consensus about what's happening, and this is what we're going to do in our model. Okay, so because we want to verify this theory, we have reproduced this phenomena in simulations in Wolfgang's group, and so the question is, can we prove it? I don't have to explain to this group the value of linearized models, okay, right? I mean, so we look at the linearized model without the cap, okay, the threshold, and we don't have a sigmoid. We have something like a threshold, or it could be a sigmoid also. But and basically the equations are these, okay, and I'll let you read them. That this is activation, and activation, and these are the synaptic weights, and on the right-hand side you have the stimulus, and activation times synaptic weights, and this, of course, is the plasticity term. Okay, so that's you get a simple equation, and what is very interesting is that after just serious but little analytical work, you get the equilibrium equation of this dynamical system, and this equilibrium equation is essentially a verbatim translation of Axel's prediction. Okay, so basically, the linearized dynamics converges geometrically to this, which essentially says what Axel said, that in order to have a good chance to go to the assembly, either you have to be born rich or to have good friends, okay?
The friends could be inhibiting, or, I mean, the xi could be positive or negative.
The excitatory, the inhibitory things, these are all, I should have said that. The inhibitory things, they become, they are used just to specify their threshold. Okay? And other than that, you have only excitatory things, all right?
The xi are all positive.
Right, yeah. So, yeah.
So just trying to understand, so there's some kind of you're living in a soup of sparse random graph, and then somewhere excitation happens, and then
excitation comes from outside.
Some group of neurons.
Some group of neurons that lives outside, okay, right? Okay. Then this thing is determined, okay? And then you get to see, it keeps happening. And you see how.
Looking at your neighbors, somehow updating using your neighbors.
Yes, yeah. This is what these equations do. Okay, and this is what if you repeat, if you keep pushing this button, so this will happen in the end. And actually, it happens after 4 or 5 cycles.
So what is this saying in words? So
it says that in order to have a good chance to be in the assembly, you either have to get a lot of stimulus, or you have to have to be preceded by people who have a good chance of being in the assembly. Okay?
The square means that some outliers, which are very large, will influence you a lot more.
No, less. This is so square means these are square of small numbers smaller than 1. Okay, right? Yeah. Okay. So basically, the square says that if all your predecessors are either out or have about the same x, then the degree matters.
So why did Wij disappear in the?
The Wij basically we have solved it, and it's basically you can express it. It turns out in terms of the xij's, the xi's and j's.
So this is the steady state.
Right.
So is this alpha fixed, or what is it?
It is not fixed. It's something that would be sort of confusing if I put it here. It's no. It's a function of x. Okay, right. But okay. Okay. Thanks. So, in a nonlinear model, so basically, okay. So that's for the linear model. So it's in the nonlinear model you can prove something very similar, even a little more extreme. Initially, the born-rich cells fire. Then about half of the born-rich cells fire again, and this half is very stable. So that it's between 0.4 and 0.6, or for a larger scale of parameters, and then so do some other highly connected cells, and it's not that the rich get richer; the rich get stably rich through plasticity, and a part of the assembly may keep oscillating, and common periods are 2 and 3. Okay, how can a set of random neurons have exceptionally strong connectivity, and how do associations happen? On the last one, how do associations, you present both Obama and Eiffel Tower, and as a result, we hope that these things come together. So it turns out that graph theory, for connectivity associations does not seem to suffice. Okay. as I said, we have G and P with with P about 1%, and it turns out that Song et al. 10 years ago, but also several labs elsewhere, have pointed out that what seems to happen in the brain, and in fact in the MTL, is that some deviation from GNP. And this means, for example, that if this is 1%. Once this happens, this is 10%. Once you have two edges, the probability that the triangle is completed is much higher. Okay, and it turns out that if you have this, you sort of solve the mystery, because imagine that for association, for example, right? I mean, that these two neurons, one is for Eiffel, one is for Obama. They have, this guy has a lot of neurons supporting it here. This guy also has a few neurons supporting it here. And the point is that if you think a little about it, the birthday paradox tells you there is going to be at least one neuron that goes to both. And as a result, these guys are going to be very highly connected. Okay? And the numbers work right. And in fact, the same will say that inside the assemblies, there's going to be, because of the birthday paradox, a lot of connectivity that is sort of latent.
You mean from triangle completion?
For triangle completion, yes. And also the back edges help also, in a similar way. So the theory challenge, how do you select the dense induced subgraph? Through recruiting expressly highly connected nodes and plasticity and edge completion and birthday paradox. Okay, so this is so one thing I want to point out is that as von Neumann has predicted, okay, so the algorithm vanishes. Okay, so there is hardware and the task that have co-evolved and have eventually triumphed. Okay. Okay. Another operation is bind. So quickly, bind is something that Valiant called link, but there is an interesting difference that it's not between assemblies, but between an assembly and a brain area. For example, give is a verb. A pointer assembly is a surrogate of the give is formed in the verb area, and this has been conjectured by several people, in cognition, and this our group has also represented in simulations, and the same math supports the existence of bind. And bind means again that if you are in the MTL and you want to assert that give is a verb, then by repeating this trick, you get something called assembly pointer, which is essentially an assembly surrogate of give in the verb area. So quickly going through, items, as I said, eternal connectivity is immaterial. Join and link are not the same as association. They're formed, these join and link are formed by recruiting completely new cells through orchestrated precise setting of the parameters. And a couple of years ago, and this is how we started on this, we came up with a beautiful killer primitive generalizing join called predictive join, which if the brain had, it could be even better than what it is now. But every time we tell neuroscientists, the eyes light up, and then they ask us, but does it exist? We know after scathing criticism of our theory of how this could happen in the brain, we decided to retreat and do this. Okay, right. So that's
Adversarial training.
right. Precisely. Yes. Right. Yeah. So it worked. Skip this. The environment is extremely important. So in a boring planet, our brain will not be what it is. So there is learning, there is evolution, and everything has to do with the environment. And the language is an environment because a lot of what we do is process language, our language input, which is created by us a few thousand years ago when the brain was essentially what it is today. And it's a last-minute adaptation, and maybe it evolved so as to exploit the brain strength. Okay, so incidentally, now that we all agree that we should work on the brain, okay, so I think this is the Berkeley sunset, okay, right? Language, and sort of you've heard about grammar in earlier talks in this workshop. Just to point out that assemblies, association, bind, and of course p-join, but let's not talk about that, seem ideally suited for implementing grammar and language in the brain. I have 2-3 minutes.
Yeah. Well, since you're talking about language, I'm not going to turn.
Okay, right, yeah. So I was going to switch away from language. Okay.
Okay. Well,
So let me. So this is about learning representations. Let me show you something sort of completely different. So that you might find interesting. Imagine that there is a mouse, and it goes around. So this is its nest. So okay, and okay. If you don't know about grid cells, you're not going to believe this. Okay, the mouse has in its brain a cell which fires. Okay. Every dot in this map, it's the same picture as before, is the same space as before. Every dot in this map is a time when this cell fired, when the mouse was here. Okay, the dots in this map are the place where this particular cell fired. They form a triangular grid. They form a perfect triangular grid. Squint a little. Okay?
Wait, what is the distance here? This is the physical distance.
Physical distance. Now, that's representation learning in the real world. Okay, so all right. 3 years ago, these people got the Nobel Prize for discovering it. It's a random representation of the real world, but how, for what purpose? There is the literature is full of speculation. Here is mine. Okay, if you are interested. But going back to, so I guess I have a. So what is missing is I don't know what's happening, and I'm warning the next speaker. But let me read to you the conclusions. How does one think computational about the brain? Assemblies may be one path. Experimental neuroscience and cognitive science provide specs and hardware. The algorithm often vanishes. And ultimately language, okay? And then I had a picture of the Berkeley sunset to say goodbye. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we are a little over, but since the next thing is a break, maybe we can take a couple of minutes for a couple of quick questions. And I'm actually going to take the host prerogative for this session and ask. So you made this point that maybe language is, in some sense, adapted to or evolved to be learnable by babies. But there's also this famous set of results that you see language is sort of regularizing and renormalizing when they're brought up by speakers who have very degraded input. So either because they're non-hearing speakers who are being raised by people who don't sign very well, or sort of evolving when they're starting to speak with other signers, or because of pidgin speakers who are now creolizing. And is that evidence of that evolution, or is that a challenge for the evolution or this computational adaptation strategy?
Good point. I have not thought about that. I think it's both. It's maybe it's adapted so well that sort of that it works even in under duress. Yeah, but but it's something to be taken into account for sure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah.
So you said that as far as we know, it's somehow approximately the connection in the brain like GNP, like a random graph.
No, it deviates seriously from random graph, and this seems to be operational.
Because I'm concerned about the use of randomness. I mean, for me, randomness is just other way of saying we don't understand it. So what is the evidence that, what language you use to describe this graph rather than...
Yeah. So listen, if randomness is a vehicle for saying we don't understand it, okay, we should definitely use it in the brain, okay, right?
In your last example, does the triangular grid depend on the geometry of the rat's nest?
Yes, actually, very good question. Sometimes they take screws and they make the rat's nest, 20% less wide, and the grid adjusts.
Okay.
Yeah. Up to a point.
One last one.
So Christos, one question with the binding, with this idea of the pointer assemblies for the binding operation.
Yes.
Did you go through the combinatorics? I mean, these proposals have been around, but then often the counter argument was, well, if you really define these pointer assemblies in a connectivity-based way, you tether everything up. You cannot really, I mean, the binding can be between two arbitrary thought.
So we had the paper in the last NIPS where we showed we didn't have the math, but we have experiments that show that it happens if you do it right. I mean, if you do it right in the right model.
What does it mean to do it right?
Basically the hypothesis is that by some attention mechanism, a particular assembly spikes and projects to another space, and that's all you need.
And are these pointer assemblies, are they structurally different from other assemblies that represent?
No. As far as I know, no.